Hey, Rogue Nation, it's so good to have you here for another episode of While You Were Working. Hey, I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes when you're reading something or you're out on the internet and you're surfing, something really catches your attention and catches your mind, and you have to just write it down on a Post-it. And you leave it around for places for you to be inspired by, maybe your laptop, your monitor. You know, on my monitor, I have one from Sir Francis Bacon. Now, you may not know who Sir Francis Bacon is. He's a philosopher, a scientist, a politician, and author from the late 1500s, early 1600s. And the quote that I found from him that I thought was so pertinent for today's episode says, "Reading makes a full man, discussion a ready man, and writing an exact man." And when I thought about that, and I thought about this idea, the other thing you probably don't know about Sir Francis Bacon is that a lot of his inspirations and his writings were pivotal in the development of the scientific method. So this idea of art and science coming together is so powerful. We talk about it a lot here in 2018, but this guy was talking about it late 1500s, 1600s. And again, this idea of reading and discussion and writing all coming together and making you, a more informed and a more precise and a better person is so exciting. So with that kind of as an introduction, I want to introduce you to this week's guest, who is Christoph Trappe. And Christoph, you may have seen him. You probably are recognizing his face, maybe from some marketing seminars that you might have gone to. You might read his blog. He's definitely out and about on the internet. And so there's a lot of opportunity for you to have come across him. He is also leading content experiences for a company called Staymates. And he's got a really cool job because what he's doing is he's helping some well-established business magazines transform into that digital environment. And so, Christoph, what a cool opportunity you've had to and a fun challenge you've had with those particular business magazines.
Absolutely, Chip. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. That's always great to hear some new quotes and learn new things, of course. But yeah, definitely a fun challenge. And it is a challenge, right? Because as we know, print and digital are very, very different, but everything requires good storytelling. So if you don't have a good story to share, what's the point? Nobody's going to pay attention, obviously.
I love that. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Content as an experience. You're an evangelist for this idea of content being an experience. But before we get there, and again, this Francis Bacon, he definitely was talking about the experience. What is it like when you're reading something? What is it like when you're discussing something? And then what is it like when you're actually the person who's writing it down for somebody else to read? And I know we're going to talk a lot about those different aspects throughout the course of our show. But before we do that, one of the things we always ask our guests, Rogue Marketing is known for kind of standing out, being different. And I was wondering if you had a story about, a time in your career, in your life where you were just like, you know what, I'm going to stand and do things just a little bit different. And you had some success doing that. Do you have a Rogue story?
Absolutely. In fact, I talk about authentic storytelling, and a big part of it is you have to be different. If everybody shares the same story, what's the point? How can you ever stand out? So the way I stand out usually is, I share what's there that needs to be shared, and I have unique spins on some of the similar things everybody else writes about. Every once in a while, Chip will say to me, "Hey, Christoph says whatever everybody else is thinking." And I'm like, well, that's one way to stand out. I grew up, I live in Cedar Rapids now, of course. I'm an American, but I grew up in Germany, right? And Germans are kind of straight to the point. This is how it is, right? Love it or leave it. So I guess that is actually one way to stand out, to just be real.
It sure is, and it's certainly a sign of the times too. A lot of just saying what's on that mind, which is really cool. Actually, kind of is a great segue that you brought that up, because it's a nice segue into this idea. One of the things I've heard you say a lot of times, but I also heard you just say in your intro, was this idea that what does it matter if you put something out there content-wise if nobody's actually paying attention, if nothing else happens to that content? And so you talk a lot about content experiences and writing and sharing content so that people will actually, I love this term, they'll make time for it. So what are some practical ways that anyone who might be watching this or who will watch this at a later time, what are some practical ways that leaders like us can go about creating a great content experience?
So you're absolutely right. When I grew up in print journalism, right, 20 years ago, And back then, there was no such thing as even knowing how many people read your stories and whether or not it made an impact. So back then, writing was, if you were my boss, Chip, and you like my story and I like my story, I was golden, right? Good to go. Today, if you're my boss and you like my story, but nobody else reads it, what's the point? Did we actually accomplish anything? So it is, writing, content creation has never been harder, right? Because it used to be more perception. Today, it's more, we can look at the numbers. So the way you actually do it is you have to produce content that people actually care about. And then, of course, that sounds simple in theory, but then, of course, you have to get it in front of people through whatever the latest channel is. Sometimes that's social media. You know, we're doing a Facebook Live. Sometimes it's video. Sometimes now Twitter has live audio, right, that you can do on Twitter. That's a new thing. I've had a little bit success with it. Then you have Instagram TV, which I haven't had any luck with. I tried it a few times. I haven't seen anybody succeed very much at it. Quite frankly.
Yeah, we haven't seen it. No, we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it either.
So, but the point is, you always have to hop on and try whatever is the new thing and see if you can get in front of the people that you weren't able to get in front of, or that, or new people. And the other thing is, always make sure you have an email list. I know email is not dead. Most things that people claim are dead are not dead, quite frankly. So maybe Google Plus, that is indeed now dead. But email is not dead. Other things people claim are dead are not dead. So one thing to think about is get people to sign up for your email. People still read it. Even on my blog, I put it right on the top. So before you get to the article, it's not a pop-up, but it says subscribe to the blog, and people sign up, right? And now they get my emails. So make sure you make that connection. I'd love to say social media is the answer, but the reality of things is that you have to pay to play on social media. So, one better way is really to grow your email list, and then continuously share content that people actually want to consume. And that, of course, takes some testing, takes some trying. It takes a while to find your voice, but it's a project. It's almost it's not just a campaign.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point that you're making, and I wonder if you've had some experience. You've seen some other companies out there, maybe even a company you've worked with, consulted with, et cetera. Some people you think that are doing that are really turning that content into an experience, developing pieces of content that people actually care about and make time for. What have you seen?
So if you're asking for specific examples, that is always such a hard question, because number one, if I'm not looking at Twitter, who are they? I do get emails, but you read them and you move on. But one that comes to mind, it's probably a simple answer. Content Marketing Institute. They're still sharing content. They were sold a little while ago here, but they are sharing content that's helpful, that's interesting, and most importantly, writing in digital is not so much about writing as it used to be in print. It's also about creating something that people can consume. So, for example, when you look at the Content Marketing Institute, what happens is it's skimmable, it's shareable, it's clickable. And what I mean by that is, so people would say to me, oh my goodness, why do people only skim my content? And I'm like, well, get over it. That's how it is. You can stain on your head. And if that's how they do it, what are you going to do about it? So their content, it's very skimmable. It's a thin bar, really. You read down, you have shareable links, you have shareable tweets. You have links to click to other things. So that's something to keep in mind too. As you're creating content, what else can people do with that content? Can they click onto something else? Can they skim it? And people do skim. They do. Sorry.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. We can probably think of some examples, maybe even here recently. It could be from politics. Obviously, we're in the midst of the midterm elections and all those kinds of things. And people put things out there that will help them get noticed in some form or fashion. Maybe big brands like Nike and Patagonia, and taking some of those social stances that they've had an opportunity to take. A lot of people are still wary. They're still weary of putting themselves out there in some form or fashion, and kind of saying something that they truly believe, and that they're really thinking hard about. They're cautious. They're cautious to do those kinds of things. What kinds of things have you found that people are afraid to say? Maybe you have some good stories. I know we talked a little bit about this, that you can kind of encourage people to say, you know what, maybe we should stop playing so safe. We need to take a few more risks. How would someone go about doing that?
So you really truly have to get over the hump. So today, if you look at my blog, I'm just blogging like nonstop. I can't stop. In fact, I can't write about all the things I want to write about and that I have opinions on or something to share about. So you have to get over that hump. And once you get over it, it gets a little bit easier. But the bottom line is you have to almost make it a muscle memory, right? So for example, even think about this conversation here. There was a lot of planning, involved, but really we're just having a conversation, right? We're just talking about here's what our opinion is, here's what we've seen. And people just have to be comfortable in their own skin and think about here's what I know something about. Here's my story. Here's my perception. Maybe sometimes perceptions are wrong, and that's okay, right? I wrote an article on the new Uber app for drivers, and it's actually a very well-designed app. And I made the comment, if you think about digital strategy, here's why it's designed well, because it keeps the Uber business goals in mind, right? So some things are not always the best for the driver, but they're really well-designed for the company, which, right or wrong, is actually good digital strategy. So I wrote about that, and I said, it's a well-designed app, and a UX designer disagreed and said, you're wrong. It's not well designed because this piece is not good for the drivers. So guess what? In the old world, I may have said, oh my God, I'm wrong. I said something wrong, right? Because that's how we're taught in school. Like, what's the right answer? Who can get to it the quickest? But
now you get to have a discussion.
Do you know what I mean? And I said,
yeah.
Very interesting. Send me your comments. I'll add it into the blog post. And I just said, Lindy Wheaton disagreed. She runs Pixel. I don't remember the name of the company now, but My Pixel or something. And she disagrees. And here's her comment. That would have been unheard of 20 years ago, right? Because here's my message. Don't disagree with it, or, and this is what it is. So we have to be comfortable sharing those things and then also listening to each other. The one thing, especially, when it gets heated, or especially on social media, when it comes to politics, people don't actually read what other people are saying. They're just catching those trigger words and they blow off the handle because they heard one word they didn't like, right? So have that discussion, read it, take a breath, make sure you read it correctly, and then share your own experience or your own story.
I love it. I love the authenticity of it. I know that's kind of a a capstone of yours. You do a lot from the authentic storyteller. I know that's a big part of who you are, and so we appreciate that. And that's super cool to see how that comes out, even in your conversation and how you're talking about that. One of the things that we talk a lot about here at Rogue is that we think that the industry as a whole has a vocabulary problem. We say a lot of the same things, but we don't necessarily mean the same things as we're talking about. Yeah. And you were talking about this idea that maybe one of the reasons that people were finding disagreement, if you will, on that UX that you were just talking about was that you were thinking about what it was for, and we can agree to disagree on whether that's the most right thing for that app to be doing. But in the scheme of what it was, that was a really cool, it was doing the things that it needed to do. And so we would call that a persona, and we would talk about the different kinds of things that we were looking for, et cetera. One of the things that you've talked about is how you need to dig deeper into finding out what that persona is. So I wanted to let you have an opportunity to talk about personas. What do you think of when you're doing that? And how can marketers in particular, those business leaders who are listening on the other side of this, this camera, how can they start to dig a little deeper with their personas?
So it's interesting. I have a love-hate relationship with personas. All my teams create personas. They write for personas. They know who they're supposed to write for, and then they're a really great tool to go back and say, hey, would Carl Commercial or whoever, would they care about that topic? And then if the answer is no, then why in the world are we writing about it, right? Let it go. Write about something that they care about. So knowing who you're actually trying to write for when it's based on good data is super helpful. There's also a mix, something to keep in mind. So you have the persona, right? And guess what? People evolve, and personas are people. So sometimes, maybe you have a story that goes around what that persona usually cares about, and you just write it anyways, even if it's not an exact match. So that's what I mean by, I have a love-hate relationship with personas, because when you use them well, they work really well for your team and your content creation and story creation. But if you take them too literal, sometimes that can be a problem too, because you're like, oh, Carl would never care about this. But if you write about it and they read it, guess what? They do care about it. So you either miss something or you hit a nerve or something. So use them, but don't necessarily, overthink things. And try new things. But personas, I think they're a great way. And same with goals, like set a goal. What are you trying to accomplish with this content? Is it an SEO reason? Is it visibility? Is it reach? Or is it conversion, right? Those are the three goals that we typically use for all of our content, and tie it all together and be deliberate. Now, Chip, the most important thing about being deliberate is to implement, right? So 20 years ago, we would plan and plan and plan, and we would say, here's my strategic plan with my personas and my goals and whatever. And by the time it's time to implement, everybody left and found new jobs, right? So you have to kind of do them at the same time and move forward.
A great idea is a great idea, but you got to do it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think it was interesting. You've said I've said so many different things that we could key off here. One of the things that I love that you said was this idea of we overcomplicate things. And I know you rattled off a couple of things that you're looking for goals wise, and help our listeners think about how they should be measuring their content. What are those things that they should be doing? We have a lot, concept in our industry is this idea of return on investment. You talk about return on effort. And I think that you started to kind of get into some of that, where you said, I can do a piece and then make it go somewhere different and do some other things on it. What does that return on effort look like, and how much should we be spending, and how much effort should we be putting into things?
So unfortunately, the amount of effort put in does not correlate always to the amount of outcomes, right, from a piece of content. So I'm a big fan of creating content as quickly as possible for as many channels as possible, and then seeing what works and what doesn't work. I'll give you an example. So I was in Puerto Rico talking to the convention center, and they had, they're using solar panels, right, to power the thing. I mean, unbelievable. They're on the parking lots everywhere, and it's great to see. And so, but so I said, hey, we should do a live video. So we went live on Twitter and Periscope, and the manager was talking about what's going on, like how much money it saves, how they did it, et cetera, et cetera. And the second we went live, guess what happened? Started pouring. So we're doing a story on solar panels.
So great television.
So we need sun to illustrate the story. And the second we go live, it starts pouring. Now, had we not been live, we would have probably paused, right, and do the video later, because, you would want the better background. However, it's raining. We're live. We're not going to go, oh, it's raining. We'll come back when it stops raining. We just kept going. And he said, hey, look, it's raining, but that's fine. 98% of the time it's not raining and it's sunny, and we can use these to run our power. And then what we did is we took the live video, we turned that into 2 articles for different brands, and then we actually did another edited version of the same video with like some more pictures, used the B-roll and those kind of things. So that one piece of content turned into like 6 pieces of content, and then it was used in the newsletter. It was used I think it was used in print. I don't remember. So my point is, right, the effort was relatively low if you think about it. You still have to do the work, but you went live, right? So whatever you have, and then you use it for all the other channels. And then, so my effort is low. I don't need as much return necessarily. And if I have a lot of return, now I feel even better. On the flip side, if I'm spending 3 weeks researching some article that then nobody ends up reading, right? My effort is really high and my return is really low. So kind of think about, how do you, some of us would say, how do you hack into the system? Some of us don't like that term. That's fine. But think of the concept. How do you create things quicker to see what's working and what's not working?
All these digital channels, we kind of said, we hadn't seen any success with Instagram. I am interested in trying to kind of go down that Twitter route you were just talking about, because we have not tried that. Obviously, we're here right now on Facebook Live. This will find its way to YouTube and be all over on the blogs and all those kinds of things. What I love about that is that, none of this is costing us thousands and thousands of dollars to do it, right? We get the ability to promote it and do other things with it, et cetera. So again, the return on effort is positive there. As I was thinking about that, I know you were like kind of introducing some other channels and some other things that you've been working with. One of the premises of our show is this idea that we get so busy just doing the things that we do and that we've known to do and that have brought us success at some point in our career. And we just do those things over and over. We're so busy doing our day jobs that we forget to look up and say, oh gosh, the world around us is changing. So what have you seen? What should marketers and business leaders be thinking about that maybe they're not, because they've just been, so busy just doing their day job?
Yeah, the trick is just to find that time, right? Busyness doesn't necessarily mean we're being productive. So think about, where are those pockets of time that you can find to do other things, and even, maybe pay attention to what else you might be looking at. So I'll give you an example when it comes to technology. People say all the time, oh, we want to buy this piece of technology. And I say, why? And they say, because we need it. I'm like, okay, but why? Like, what's the problem it's solving, right? And then is the cost, for example, is it cost efficient? So think about, what is the problem we're trying to solve? How do we make more time? Find those pockets of time. I'll give you an example. I wrote 2 books, Chip, and I wrote them on my phone, sitting on airplanes, sitting between meetings, sitting who knows where, but I'm not, I'm not actually sitting in front of my computer or standing in front of my computer. I'm finding those extra times. And the other thing I do on my phone, I voice dictate. So not on a plane necessarily, not at the gym, but, if I'm sitting at home on the couch, I might have my AirPods in and I'll voice dictate my article. And guess what? That is so much more efficient, so much quicker than me doing it when I have to carve out time. So think about that, and then try new things. I'll give you an example that's in the making right this week, actually. I've been trying to do virtual reality video. Oh. You know how difficult that is? It sounds so difficult. And I kept looking and looking and looking, and I couldn't find the right tools that I actually wanted to spend money on. So I finally found a virtual reality camera that I can use on my phone. So the way you do it is you take your phone, you plug it in, I think at the bottom, and it sits on it, right? It has like lenses around the phone, and it was under $100. So I reached out to Kathy Hackle. I don't know if you ever talked to her, but she's a VR expert. So if you haven't heard her on the show, maybe might be worth inviting. I said, Kathy, can you vouch for this product? And she says, absolutely. And wow. Even their new model is kind of is really good to look at too. But if you want to start with that one, so I bought it for under $100. And so I have a bunch of trips coming up. I'm going to try some new things with virtual reality video, right? So my point is, 20 years ago, Chip, I may have had to go to 5 people to get approval. What's the plan? What's the strategy? But really, just try some new things. See if they work, number one. Number two, are people going to pay attention? The biggest problem with virtual reality really is that you need a headset, right? And how many people actually have headsets already? Not that many. You can still watch them because they show us 360 video. So there might still be opportunity for people without a headset. But try new things and find the opportunity when they're relatively cheap. I mean, under $100. Could you imagine 20 years ago a camera for under $100? Crazy, right?
What a cool. I love that question that we get to ask every week, because you just never know what's going to come out as the answer on the other side. And I love this idea that, virtual reality is certainly, aspirational. And there's a lot of really cool things going on with it, et cetera. It's not mainstream by any stretch. Right. But I just love that idea. I mean, you sounded so millennial with your voice dictations and you're writing your books and all that kind of stuff on that. But the idea that, how many times have you seen one of those nifties or some sort of hack come through the Facebook channel, whatever, like 15 things you didn't know your iPhone could do, or 50 things you didn't know your smartphone could do. And, just taking that time and just trying something new is, I mean, this was a brainchild 1 year ago, just trying something new. And here we are a year later. I think each one of them gets just a little bit better. We get, even better guests. Kathy is going to definitely be on my list. We'll be looking for her. What a cool idea and what a cool concept. And so just the encouragement for everybody as you're kind of out there, just try new things. I love that. I'm looking at the time. It's amazing how fast 20 minutes can go. Christoph, thank you for spending time with us today and just bringing some really cool insights, and even taking some of what seems just tried and true and making that fresh. And so we really appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. If you want to continue to follow Christoph, if you'd like to see maybe where he's going to be speaking, he's written a few books that we will also be linking to. So in the show notes in just a few minutes, we'll have all of that out there, and you'll have an ability to go and follow him and find him at all his channels. We'll also have a link to this episode and everything available that we've been talking about throughout this show in just a few minutes over on goroad.net under the Rogue Think section. So again, Christoph, thanks for being with us. Rogue Nation, until next time, have a great week. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.